Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Conduct's interview series. Today, I'm joined by Lucas Paule, the Senior Counsel for the Las Vegas Raiders. Lucas, thank you so much for joining us today. Go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself, where you went to undergrad, anything like that.
Sure, yeah. So I'm originally from the Bay Area in San Jose, California. Went to undergrad and law school at UCLA. Loved my time there and spent a lot of time in LA after graduation. I stayed locally there at a law firm. I was at Baker Hostetler for a few years, and then I moved to a more boutique-sized firm after that. And I was pretty much practicing as a litigator for 3 years. And then I sort of decided to do a 180 with my career, and I went in-house, went to a television production company and actually advised on a bunch of reality TV shows, which is a really cool thing to do. Had a lot of fun with that, and actually loved that job. And really wasn't looking to leave. And this position opened up with the Raiders, and there really wasn't anything that would have got me to leave the last job, but for this job. And so saw it open up, applied, and thankfully it worked out. Got to join the Raiders. So I've been with the team. This is my fourth season now.
That's so cool. It sounds like you've been around, you've done a lot of different things. What first piqued your interest in sports law? When did you realize this was something you wanted to pursue?
I've always been a sports fan. As far back as I can remember, I've followed sports. Especially baseball and football are my two favorites, but I never really thought about a career in sports. Just knew I wanted to be around the game in some way. But when I was in law school, I actually got a chance to intern for the Minnesota Vikings. And it was pretty eye-opening. Gave me a chance to really understand what an in-house team does for a sports club like the Vikings. Um, but I really didn't think too much about it afterwards. I had a chance to summer with Baker Hostetler, my 2L year. And so after graduation, I went to the firm, um, stayed there for a few years, and really didn't think about it too much until this job opened up. But I think one thing that has helped a lot is at my last stop, I was still in-house. And so when you think about a sports law job, there isn't one thing that defines sports law. We are sort of generalists, and so the experience I had in my last stop really did overlap in a lot of ways with the type of work we're doing here, even though it's a different industry. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't think too much about it, but I always felt like sports is where I wanted to end up eventually.
Expanding on that, do you think your experiences professionally or as a student were most valuable in preparing you for this?
I mean, definitely the Vikings position, very on point with what I'm doing now. But again, I think, again, when you think about sports, we do so much. We do it in the lens of the sports industry, but we are handling things like employment law. We are doing things like IP, real estate. A lot of what we do in-house, no matter what the industry is, can translate pretty well into a sports related position. Obviously, you're doing it with the team in mind. You're doing it through the lens of NFL compliance and things like that. But I think a lot of the same skills are sort of transferable between in-house positions. And so being able to understand that at an early point in my career as an intern in law school, but also being able to take some of my in-house experience in my last stop and having it translate here has been really helpful as well.
You talked about being a generalist, and sports law is so much more than people think, which on surface level, it seems like a niche area, but really you're doing it all.
Mhm.
I want to talk about what your day-to-day looks like. What kind of issues are you dealing with most commonly, and what does your day look like?
Yeah, we're a small team. Right now we're three lawyers and we have a paralegal as well. Um, we usually run around four lawyers, so we're generally a small team all around. But what that means is we get a chance to kind of work on a little bit of everything across the entire organization. We advise nearly every department on the business operations side. So the way it works with our team is we sort of split up all the departments for each lawyer to sort of be that first point of contact for, so some of my departments, for example, I work with our HR team a lot. I work with our Raider Image team a lot, which is our retail arm. I work with our stadium operations team and our foundation. So it really, you can see that there's a lot of variety in the things that we do, and there isn't necessarily overlap in those areas, but it gives me a chance to kind of work on a little bit of everything with each department. And because again, we're so small in terms of a legal department, we also collaborate on a lot of things. So one of my colleagues might be working on one project and I might be working on another, but because the departments are constantly working with each other, there's a lot of overlap there. And so, no day is exactly the same. We are we're definitely spread a little thin in a lot of ways, but it definitely makes it fun. We are constantly dealing with issues of first impression because, to the Raiders' credit, we are constantly trying to think of new ways and new projects to expand our business. And we're doing all that in Nevada really for the first time. There's not really a blueprint for an NFL club in Nevada. So figuring out NFL compliance and Nevada law and how all of that interplays is sort of our, biggest challenge and the things we are constantly thinking through.
And you've been there for 4 seasons now. Have you seen a change in your tasks as time go on? Do you think it's affected by the industry or the team's priorities at all?
Oh yeah. I would say again, we are figuring things out really for the first time as an NFL franchise. Um, Again, NFL compliance is such a major key, and the NFL is constantly introducing new priorities and new initiatives, new policies. And so that's affected our day to day. But just in general, my tasks have turned from one thing to another based on, again, as you mentioned, the team's priorities, right? Last year we had a Super Bowl in town, and so everyone kind of shifted their focus to thinking about how can we support that operation. We also held training camp in California for the first time since we moved to Nevada, and so there was a lot of work that went into that, and that's not a normal thing. But again, it's sort of like on a one-off basis. It really affects the type of work you're doing and the things you're focused on. But going back to the NFL, sort of the NFL's priorities, right now, a big part of that is navigating data privacy, all the new laws that are focused on making sure that we're doing it the right way, getting proper consent and things like that. And so it's sort of like the new issue of the day right now, and that does change year over year, right? What are the biggest priorities for the NFL as a league and also us as a club?
What is your involvement or oversight of player contracts or sponsorship deal negotiations?
We don't work too much on the player contracts. To the extent we work on football related things, it's usually supporting them in other ways. It could be anything from travel to, again, setting up training camp to vendor contracts. Every now and then there will be things like working on some of the coaching and scouting contracts and things like that. But I would say on the football side, there isn't too much interaction there. I think that surprises people because most people think when you hear sports law that we are working with agents and things like that. But we are actually much more multifaceted than that on the business side. You mentioned sponsorship, for example. It's such a massive piece of our work. We are, I think at the top, probably in the top three or four teams in terms of sponsorship revenue across the league. And so, again, to our team's credit, they are constantly finding new business to bring in, which is great, and it keeps us busy. And I mentioned each of the lawyers on our team kind of split up the duties and the departments, but sponsorship is such a massive operation that we almost all tackle it as a team together. It's not really assigned to one person. It's hey, it's all hands on deck when it comes to sponsorship.
Yeah, those are big. I can't imagine doing that alone.
The deals can really vary, right? There's a lot of variety. There's multi-year contracts. There's different assets that go with each sponsorship, and so it really allows us to, kind of sharpen our negotiating skills there when it comes to sponsorships.
Like you said, people seem to think that sports law is player contracts and negotiating those kind of things. Was there anything that surprised you entering your position?
I keep going back to it, but I really do think it is an important thing to point out. I mean, this is the first time the NFL's had a team in Nevada, and so for us, we are, again, figuring out how to navigate Nevada law on a lot of things and how that interplays with um, NFL compliance, right? And so that I think that's one thing I didn't expect. Everything from the gambling rules to the lottery rules to employment law out here. But doing that at the same time, where we still have to sort of navigate California law too, because of our nexus to that state. We were a California franchise for so long, and so that still affects a lot of parts of our organization, everything from workers' comp to employment too. We just pulled out of California fairly recently. So, um, we are, yeah, we are still navigating California in a lot of ways. And so it's sort of that interplay between all three of those things.
Especially being in Nevada, are there any trends that you're paying close attention to, whether it's sports betting, NILs, anything like that?
I'll go back to data privacy again. I think data privacy is just it's been so consuming for all of us. The NFL has a lot of new initiatives on how they want to treat data privacy, but that also means we have to have a better understanding of each state's laws on that. Every state kind of handles it differently. There's not sort of one comprehensive federal statute on data privacy. And so we're closely watching whether that ends up happening. But in the meantime, we are, again, we have to think about how we interact with California. A lot of our fans are still in California. And so, being able to market to them and figuring out how to navigate data privacy laws in California, which are the strictest, while doing that in Nevada has been a challenge for us. And then on top of that, we are continuing to build up our brand internationally. Working with the league on doing things in Mexico and in Australia and New Zealand. Those are our most recent international marketing territories, if you will. And so learning sort of the data privacy requirements and laws in each of those countries as well has been a challenge. So we are constantly doing activations and watch parties and working with influencers and things internationally, which has been really cool. But obviously comes with its own set of just legal compliance that we need to navigate. So we are thinking through that, but we are also leaning on outside counsel in each of those countries to kind of help navigate that. But yeah, I mean, marketing and again, just events and activations are constantly increasing across the league, but for us as well. And so that will continue to be something we face over the next few years. So those are the things I would say we're monitoring most recently.
So, what are your favorite things about your job?
Favorite things about my job. I mean, I actually grew up a Raiders fan. Like I mentioned, I've watched sports all my life. I love football, I love baseball, but the Raiders I've been a diehard Raiders fan. So part of the reason why I ended up leaving my last job and applying for this one, I just knew it'd be incredible to work for the team. So for me, this is really a dream come true. I would have been happy to be in sports, but to get to do this for a team that I love and grew up rooting for is just great. You really have that extra sort of love and passion for what you do because it means a lot more. So I think that's an easy answer, right? I get to do this for a living, but also we are in a unique position where we get to do a lot of things really for the first time. I mentioned we're here in Nevada, so we're navigating those challenges. But we've done a bunch of other really cool things. Like we had the Super Bowl in town last year. We have worked with the NFL on other things. Like they had the draft here in Vegas recently. Um, we are one of the few teams that continues to manage our own retail. So that's not something that a lot of legal teams get to tackle. We own our own stadium, and so nearly every third-party event that comes through, um, we have eyes on it, or we work with our stadium manager on that. So I think as a legal team, we get to work on a lot of cool and interesting issues that not necessarily every legal team across the league has to deal with. And so I think all of that, again, keeps things interesting and keeps things fun.
That sounds so fun. Looking back, is there anything you wish you would have known or done differently?
I think early on, the more you get, the more experience you get early on is always really key. I ended up in this role and I'm really, really happy to be here, but I also feel like I took sort of a crooked path to get here. It's not necessarily the more traditional path. Obviously, I started off at a big firm doing, as a litigator, I was in the television and entertainment industry. And so it wasn't really, I did have the internship with the Vikings, but uh, it wasn't sports focused, right, early on in my career. I think at least through law school and any chance I got after that, I would have tried to do more things more sports related, so I could have been even more prepared for this role. But um, I know that it's always hard to get your foot in the door that first time. So you kind of take whatever opportunity comes up. But I think in law school, I would have tried to do more practical experiential things, clinics, internships, anything else that I could have gotten my hands on that was in the sports industry. I really didn't do too much. And even in terms of classes taken, I really didn't do too many sports related things. So I just didn't, it seemed like such a unicorn role that seemed so far off. I didn't even put two and two together in terms of like, hey, this is something I could do for my career. And so I think opening up my eyes earlier on would have been helpful.
Well, it's reassuring to know that you can take a non-traditional path into sports and still end up in a great position.
I think the lesson I've taken from my career and that I try to pass on to students is, even if you don't get sports right away and sports is really where you want to be, it's not the end all be all, right? There will be opportunities later down the road. You just have to continue to make yourself marketable, right? So no matter what field you end up in or area you end up in, you got to try to do things that are ultimately relevant to an in-house role or wherever you may end up, going. So I mentioned things like employment law or IP things or real estate or like some of the things that we as generalists will end up working on. And so if you become an expert in something like that, even as a litigator, you have to manage outside counsel on those kinds of things. So there are ways to make yourself marketable even if you don't end up in sports right away.
Last question. Do you have any advice for students looking to pursue a career in sports law?
Obviously getting as much experience as you can. And it doesn't have to necessarily be, I know how difficult it can be to get internships or whatever it may be, but even if it's shadowing a lawyer or just grabbing coffee and networking and getting to know them, there are just so many ways to kind of network and get to know people. I would say that this industry is so small. It seems like every lawyer across every team and league seems to kind of know each other a little bit. And so once you kind of know someone, you kind of know everyone. But I would just continue to, find ways to network. And yeah, again, get as much experience as you can, whether that's clinics, internships, introductory roles, entry roles, whatever it may be. I would continue to do that. But I think as an in-house lawyer, two things really stand out for me. One is understanding the industry really well, doing everything, and that's whether you're with a club or with a sports adjacent company or sports adjacent industry like gambling or whatever it may be, right? Understanding the industry really well so you understand the context of when you're giving legal advice, how that fits into the business's overall plan, right? And that's sort of a segue too into the second piece, which is just understanding, like how your role fits into the overall business. We are thinking constantly of legal risk and things we want to avoid in terms of mitigating risk, but at the same time, like you also have to think about the overall objective of the company and where the business is headed, so you can better advise your business partners on here potentially are things that you should be aware of, but maybe you want to take the risk on, or hey, like we really shouldn't do this. Let's not go down this road at all. But you're at least doing it with the context of the business in mind. So you're not just saying it from the standpoint of like being an obstacle or being an impediment as a lawyer, right? So there's constantly that sort of push and pull between the lawyers and the non-lawyers, but you want to make sure that you're giving your advice for the right reasons. And then finally, I think that's sort of as a related point is just being able to talk to non-lawyers. I think that's a skill in itself. Um, we, as lawyers and law students, we are constantly wrapped up in legal ideas, terms, whatever it may be, right? And so we often forget that when we're talking to someone who doesn't necessarily have those concepts or that background in mind, um, we have to be able to make someone who isn't familiar with that follow us and understand why we got to where we got to and the reasoning for it. So I think all those things are important.
Lucas, thank you so much for joining us today, providing insight to future sports lawyers. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.